reasons I wanted to talk to Jessica. And even a friend of mine who's involved with the ACLU said that reproductive rights in this country is quickly becoming deprioritized, not only because we just don't have the headspace to keep up with everything that's happening vis-a-vis abortion rights and birth control, et cetera, and what's happening in every state. Uh, but it's really hard to keep up with it and hard for, I think, journalists to keep up with it, which is why I'm grateful for Jessica Valenti. Jessica is the founder of Abortion Every Day and is one of the most influential voices, you all, on gender and politics. She's the author of 8 books. It's very prolific, including the New York Times bestseller, Abortion, Our Bodies, Their Lies, and the Truths We Used to Win. And Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Power in a World Without Rape, the groundbreaking anthology that helps set the gold standard for sexual consent. Um, anyway, I'm really grateful that Jessica is really keeping track of this stuff, everyone, and reporting on it. And I thought it was worth kind of catching up with Jessica so we all know what's happening across the country in terms of reproductive rights. So, gosh, we have a lot to cover and not a ton of time. So, Jessica, let's start with South Carolina.
Yeah.
Tell us what is known as SB 323, also known as the Inborn Child Protection Act bill.
Yeah, so SB 323 is one of the more extreme abortion bans that you will come across. And I think what's really important for people to know is that, yes, this matters very much for South Carolina, but this is actually model legislation from national anti-abortion groups. And so we're really getting sort of a roadmap to what they want for all of us. They're just using South Carolina as a testing ground. So I think it behooves us all to pay attention to what's happening in these states. And this bill would not only ban all abortion, it would ban some kinds of birth control. It would criminalize abortion patients. So abortion patients could be charged with homicide. It would mandate anti-abortion propaganda videos in public schools. It would make free speech around abortion a felony. So telling someone about abortion, sharing information about abortion, it is really like the most extreme version of one of these bills that you can imagine. And I think what tends to happen when we see a bill like this get introduced is that people think it's so extreme, there's no way that anything is going to happen with it, that it's, it's going to get killed or it's going to get watered down, and so we don't need to worry about it. That's just not the case. We're seeing more and more of these bills. Again, it's a roadmap. And the 2 things that I worry about the most with this legislation, one is the criminalization, because we're seeing more and more bills proposed that want to charge abortion patients with homicide. And 2 is the attack on birth control. This bill redefines certain kinds of contraception as no longer contraception.
For
And so,
example, so
yeah,
can you just kind of go through chapter and verse what
yeah.
this bill says, Jessica, just to help us understand?
With contraception specifically, they are trying to say that any sort of contraception that prevents implantation, right? The science is iffy on this. They're sort of reaching, but their argument is that IUDs, emergency contraception, and some forms of the birth control pill are not really contraception at all, but are abortions. And it would be sort of easy, again, to dismiss this as a radical thought if this wasn't the norm now in anti-abortion circles, and if you didn't have the Trump administration using that same definition. I'm sure you've heard about this $10 million stockpile
Yeah, somebody
of
just mentioned that.
contraception.
Somebody
Yeah.
just mentioned that in the comments.
Exactly. The reason that they gave, and there hasn't been a lot of coverage on this, the reason they gave for why they want to burn that contraception, which are oral contraceptives, IUDs, implants, they said it's because they're abortifacient contraceptives. They're saying that they're abortions, and therefore they want to burn them. I mean, that is a official Trump policy, saying that contraception is abortion. That is such a big deal. That is so wild.
And I
And the
feel like
fact that
nobody's paying attention to this.
nope.
So is this if this bill passes in South Carolina and you're saying that it very well could, and it serves as a blueprint for the rest of the country. Basically, if I live in South
Mm,
Carolina and I was of childbearing age, which I'm
mhm.
no longer, but I couldn't get an IUD.
They
I
could make that argument, yeah. I mean,
I
I
could
think that that's
I
the
could
that's
now
the
and
idea.
when you say certain forms of birth control pills,
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand what that means.
So I think for sure what, Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, the Planned Parenthood in the area, their lawyers, when they looked at this bill, they took that to mean that there's an oral contraceptive that just got approved for over-the-counter use, right? It's called Opill. That is the one that they are concerned about that this pill would impact, or that this bill would impact. Um, but once you go down that road, right, where we're talking about banning birth control pills, we're talking about banning IUDs, or even if you're not banning it, right, just redefining contraception, because that is the argument they're trying to make. Who said anything about banning? We're just defining contraception, right? And so they're doing this similar sort of thing that they did with abortion rights, where they are taking this chipping away approach, knowing that Americans are completely overwhelmed with everything else that's happening and hoping that no one will notice. And at the same time, calling feminists hysterical for saying, hey, you're coming after birth control. Because the first thing they say is, where's the law? I don't see a ban on birth control, right? Um, it's really telling.
And and just getting back to that $10 million worth of
Mhm.
contraceptions, that's in a warehouse in Belgium,
In
is that
Belgium.
right?
Yeah, they're in this really sort of dangerous holding pattern because the contraceptives are not expired. The
Mhm.
government of Belgium is not giving them an incineration license. Good for them. They're saying you can't burn this. This is perfectly good contraceptives. But the countries that were meant to get these contraceptives, they have rules about how long they can wait. They're not going to take medication that only has a certain amount of shelf life left on it, right? And so the US government seems to think if they can just wait it out, if they can't burn it, they'll wait it out until it's no longer good, and so no countries can get them anyway. But you're talking about, again, $10 million of contraceptives, hundreds of that, like the lives that would be
It's
impacted
so
by that. The health,
infuriating.
it's insane. You're talking about people's health and lives because of this like very bizarre idea that it's abortion.
Well, let's talk about what else the South Carolina bill does.
Mhm,
So, obviously, a chilling and really creepy impact on birth control. What
mhm.
about vis-a-vis abortion?
Yeah, so it would be a total abortion ban, and even if you needed an abortion to save your life, the way that they have written this bill, you wouldn't be able to get a standard abortion procedure at a certain point. You would be forced into a C-section or a vaginal delivery, even when it is too early for the fetus to survive. I mean, and we've seen this sort of thing happen, by the way, in states like Louisiana, where doctors are increasingly performing C-sections on patients who are like 15 weeks pregnant because the law is so severe. It's a way for them to try to divorce abortion from healthcare. And then there's the criminalization aspect, right? There's the we're going to charge you with homicide, and those are called equal protection clauses, equal protection bills. And I think at last count, we saw about 12 or 13 states introduce some form of these bills. And again, these are bills that for so long we were told those are outliers. This is on the fringe. This is extreme. They're never going to go anywhere. Well, guess what? They're getting introduced more. They're getting more co-sponsors. The activists behind these bills are now running for office and winning, elected office. It's all happening.
What about, Jessica, remember criminalizing people who would drive, say, let's
Yeah.
say your 16-year-old daughter gets pregnant and she can't get an abortion in the
Mhm.
state where you're living, and you
Yep.
decide to drive to New York or drive to a nearby state where she can get an abortion. There are all these states that are now criminalizing that, right? Can you give us the
Yeah.
status on that?
Sure. So that is also in the South Carolina bill. Two states that have done that so far are Idaho and Tennessee. Certain parts of the laws are blocked because they're being held out in court because the laws are written so broadly that literally sending, a 17-year-old a text message with, "Hey, here's a link to an abortion clinic," could be a felony, right? It's not just about bringing teens out of state, and they're starting with teens, I should say, because what happens to teens today comes for the rest of us tomorrow. They're using young people as a testing ground. It's really helping a teenager in any way, shape, or form get an abortion would be criminal. Now, in certain counties in Texas, I think it's like 8 counties now, they have passed local ordinances that apply to women of all ages. It's not criminal, it's civil, but effectively, like if you took a friend, if you drove them through this county on the way out of state to get an abortion, you could be sued. Your life could be ruined. And the point is to create this chilling effect to make people too afraid to help each other, to make people feel like they have no support system. They can't go to anyone because they'll be putting them in legal danger. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Republicans know that people are helping each other. There are all of these abortion funds. There are all of these activists who are making sure that people can get the care that they need. It's been 3 years since Roe was overturned and the abortion rate hasn't gone down. It's gone up, right? Like the only thing they've managed to do is make women's lives miserable, to make the maternal and infant mortality rate go up. They haven't reduced the abortion rate. And so in that way, it's been a big failure, but women are suffering as a result.
Let before Tell me about, is the South Carolina bill, when is that up? Is that going to be voted on? Is that
They,
or is that
yeah,
just the state legislature? Are they gonna
yeah, they just had a hearing about it last week, and what was really incredible was there's this amazing turnout for people testifying. I don't know when the next date is, but it was heard by this small all male committee, which is not surprising at all. And so now, presumably, they will try to water it down in some way, maybe on the criminalization aspect, for example, to make people feel like, see, we gave something and we can move forward. They tried to pass a similar bill, almost the exact same one, not too long ago in South Carolina, and they weren't able to do it. But the activists that I spoke to in South Carolina say the legislature has changed, and so they're much more worried this time around. They think that it's going to get further.
Oh gosh. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in Texas. Attorney General
Mm,
Ken Paxton boasted today about the arrests of 8 more people
yeah,
connected to Maria Margarita Roja, the Houston area midwife who became the first person charged under Texas criminal abortion law in March. She faces 15 felony counts for allegedly providing
yeah.
2 abortions. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, we're waiting to find out more information. Everything that we've heard so far is that the case is really shoddy. I think it is telling that Paxton decided to go after, one, a midwife, and two, all of the people that they've arrested are of Latina descent. And they are really using a lot of racist language. They're using a lot of dog whistles. They're using the word illegal a lot, right? Illegal
Mhm.
abortionist, illegal. Like they're trying to get people riled up around immigration at the same time that they're doing
Right.
this. Um, but the criminalization is really scary. And I should say something else that we reported on in Texas this week. It's not just providers. Just recently, the cops accessed an automated license plate reader and searched 83,000 cameras around the country looking for an abortion patient. They opened up a criminal investigation into an abortion patient, which they're not supposed to do. And so there's a reason that people in Texas and people in these states are so scared, because they know that there's a difference between what politicians say is going to happen and the reality of what it looks like for people who are actually getting care or providing care.
Wait, sorry to be dopey,
Yeah.
but I don't
No.
understand the license and what
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
No, it's fine. I know. So there are these companies, right? So this company in this case is called Flock. It's an automated license plate reader company. And so you can like go on your computer, cops can go on their computer and they can create a search and they can put in like a warrant or a request, and they just look for someone's license plate among all of these cars. And in this case, they were looking for an abortion patient. There
But
was a great
how do they know to look for that abortion? I'm sorry, I don't get
they're
it.
looking for her license plate number.
But
So
how
they're
do they
searching
know?
all of these different cameras. They know what her license plate is, right?
Oh, they
And
know
so
her
they're
license plate. How do they know her license plate?
well, this is what ends up happening is that we find out just this week is that her abusive partner turned her in. Her abusive partner was unhappy that she ended her pregnancy without his permission. And so he turned her into the police, who then opened up a criminal death investigation. They collected evidence, went to the district attorney to see about bringing her up on charges, even though Texas law prohibits bringing up abortion patients on charges. And then when journalists found out, there's a great investigation from a site called 404 Media. When they found out, the cops tried to cover it up and say, no, we were just worried about her health and safety. I have never known cops to search 83,000 cameras for an abortion patient's health or safety. And so, even though they are saying that they are not going after patients, it is very clear that criminalization is on the table.
That is disgusting. Julia
It
just
is.
said, America, America really hates women. Damn.
Yep.
Um, okay. So Texas obviously is
Yep.
still a hot mess in this department. A lot of great reporting that you've done and other like ProPublica have done about women dying, waiting to
Yeah.
terminate their pregnancies because something is wrong. They're bleeding. They're sick. The baby has no chance of thriving after it's born.
Yeah.
Uh, are we hearing more reports about that? Because honestly, Jessica, I'm not really reading a lot about that
I
anymore.
know. Well, I think it's a couple of things. I certainly hear from a lot of people. And what tends to happen, I think, is that people are scared once you make clear to them what actually happens when you go public with a story like this. So I think that there's a lot of fear about coming forward. And I'm really sorry to say it, but I think that a lot of newsrooms saw that the reaction to these stories to right, like ProPublica is amazing, and they, won a Pulitzer for that. It's not like there was a ton of traffic. There's not like when these horror stories come out in other publications, you do not see them make a lasting impact in the news. And I think that too many newsrooms think that readers don't care, or that they're so overwhelmed, or that the stories are so horrible that they don't want to continually read about them. But we know that it's happening. I certainly hear from people. We know the maternal death rate is going up. And I would also say this is not just about people dying, it's about people suffering, right? Like, we are not getting a rate of how many women are being forced to carry a doomed pregnancy to term. We're not getting a rate for someone who goes septic. There's all of this severe harm that's happening that we don't have data for, and that Republican states are like proactively covering up. Like, they are, getting rid of their maternal mortality committees. They are in Texas. They are stacking that maternal mortality committee with anti-abortion activists. So they are really doing their best to make sure that Americans do not find out about the consequences of bans.
Honestly, this makes me sick and
It's sickening.
disgusted and furious. And you talk about Texas. I want to ask you about a couple of other states.
Yeah,
Missouri, Republicans,
yeah,
abortion is popular. They're trying to make their ballot measure ban sound as quote unquote pro choice as possible. They're even calling it Amendment 3, the
hmm
same name as the Abortion Rights Amendment that passed in November. So tell me
yeah,
what the hell is happening in Missouri. Then we'll talk about Louisiana, and then we're going to find out if there's anything we can do about this.
yeah. So Missouri is one of the best examples of when attack on abortion rights is an attack on democracy, right? Missouri voters in November voted for Amendment 3, which codified protections for abortion. Republicans didn't like that very much, and so they've been trying to chip away and attack it ever since through, court battles. Now, Republicans have decided we want to put abortion back on the ballot. It's going to go on the 2026 ballot, and voters are going to have another chance. But because they know that voters are pro-choice, they're calling it Amendment 3 to try to trick them. And they are using language. So, like, when you look at the ballot summary, it says, voting for this would make sure that women with ectopic pregnancies can get care. This would make sure that women who have miscarriages can get care. Make sure that like, they're making it sound as if you are voting for abortion access. It's one of the most like cynical, obvious, ridiculous things that you can possibly imagine. I mean, to me, the fact that they're calling it Amendment 3 enough should be completely
Right.
illegal. That's bananas. But it also just goes to show how badly they know that they're losing on this issue. They know that it is so incredibly unpopular. They can't afford to tell the truth about it. They can't afford to tell voters what these laws would actually do. To me, that's the most.
Is there a campaign that's significant in Missouri trying to educate voters that this is what they're up to?
Yeah, there is, and there will be. You know, the same folks behind the original Amendment 3 are doing that work. I know there's a tremendous activism on the ground with abortion funds, and they're trying to raise awareness. But if you're not paying attention to this issue closely, why would any everyday voter know this, right? Like, why would any ordinary citizen understand that Republicans are trying to trick you, understand that they're using the same name, right? But it's stuff that we've seen before in Nebraska. When Nebraska's pro-choice ballot measure failed, it was largely because the anti-abortion side ran an opposing ballot measure that had almost the exact same name. And so they're trying all of these different strategies out to see what sticks, and they've realized that this is one of their best bets.
Is this all kind of tied into Project 2025? This whole idea, I think, of wanting women to have more children, being very anti choice, anti, reproductive rights. Can you talk about that? Because it is pretty much spelled out in this
Yeah.
document by the Heritage Foundation. And just so everyone knows, this is really, really about procreation and denying women
Oh,
bodily autonomy.
yeah, it's about control. As you said, they told us, they laid it out, they put it in writing for us. They told us exactly what they were going to do, from, defunding Planned Parenthood to stripping Title X, federal birth control funds, to rerouting those funds to crisis pregnancy centers, to, pressuring women into having more children. It is all laid out there. And then, of course, there's all of the strategies that aren't laid out there, right? Like the super insidious cultural campaign against birth control on social media, where you'll see TikTok influencers talking about how terrible hormonal contraception is. They are coming at it from all angles, because what better way to convince young women that it's great that you don't have your rights anymore than to say, look, this was terrible for you anyway, so you should be
Right.
happy
And
that they're
and there
gone.
was a study recently that said 50% of the women's health information, medical information on TikTok is inaccurate, completely
Yeah,
false.
yeah,
And you're right, it is everywhere on TikTok.
everywhere.
Well, let's talk about Louisiana.
Mm,
They've officially filed a lawsuit against the FDA over, I always
yeah.
say this wrong. Can you help me, Jessica?
But the first stone, yeah,
Mifepristone. That's a
yeah.
very
You
hard
could just say
one.
Miffy.
Miffy.
That's what everyone in the know says, Katie. Just Miffy, Miffy and
Okay,
miso.
Miffy. So they want to restrict access
Yeah.
the abortion medication. Can you explain what's going on there?
Sure. So this lawsuit comes on the heels of Liz Murrill, the Attorney General of Louisiana, tried to join. There's another existing lawsuit from the AGs of Kansas, Idaho, and Missouri, who brought like a near identical case against the FDA, but they brought it in Texas. Texas said, you don't have standing, so we need to move this to Missouri. Louisiana tried to join it. They couldn't, so now they're bringing their own case. The short version is they are relying on a whole bunch of junk science to claim that mifepristone, which has been used for decades safely and effectively, is somehow unsafe, that it's
And
harming
and
women.
medical abortions, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, mifepristone is the first of two medications that you take to end a pregnancy. There's mifepristone and misoprostol. And mifepristone is the one that they are going after the FDA. And in addition to these lawsuits, by the way, the RFK and the head of the FDA just announced that they're conducting a safety review of mifepristone, their own review. Again, it's been used safely for decades. It's just complete and utter bunk.
So they're trying to restrict access. So they're trying to outlaw it in Louisiana. But there was also
Yeah.
talk, and again, I apologize for not
No.
remembering all the the steps that are going on about restricting mailing uh,
Yes.
mifepristone. Can you tell me where that
Yeah.
stands?
So that is definitely their number one priority, right? Because as we said, abortion rate is not going down. One of the primary reasons the abortion rate is not going down is because providers in shield states like New York, California, Massachusetts are mailing abortion medication to people in Texas, Tennessee, right?
Mississippi, yeah.
Mississippi. And so it's making it so that people can get around these abortion bans. Thank goodness. Republicans are very upset about this, and so they want to stop the mailing of abortion medication entirely. And so one of the things that they want to do with the FDA is if they can roll back approval to stop people from being able to get mifepristone using telehealth. So if they can get rid of telehealth for mifepristone, you're talking about a huge chunk of abortion in the United States right now. Right now, 1 in 4 abortions are provided via telehealth. And so right off the bat, they could eradicate 1 in 4 abortions just by getting rid of telehealth.
And also, aren't the majority of abortions now using mifepristone?
63%. Yeah, 63% of
63%.
mhm, yeah, are abortion medication. People prefer, understandably, especially with all of these like protesters in front of clinics, they would prefer to be at home. They like the idea of that like privacy, that comfort. Uh, Republicans don't like that very much. They want you to have to walk through a gauntlet of protesters calling you a slut and a whore. And so it's been just a huge jump. And again, because of the telehealth, because of abortion bans, there's been a huge jump. And because procedural abortions now, because of these bans, providers are trying to encourage as many patients as possible to take the medication so that they can save time for the procedural abortions for people who have more complicated cases, right? If you look at a state like Illinois, they are seeing just a tremendous number of patients who are maybe later in their pregnancy who have complications, and that's where they need to go to get those procedural abortions.
Or if
And
they
so,
live in Indiana, they can't get or and then all these doctors aren't helping these patients because they're so afraid in a lot of these states. And it's horrible because these women, you talk about suffering, but they're also like in dire straits and they
yeah,
need medical attention. And all these doctors are refusing to help them, right?
yeah, I mean, it's really, really, I don't envy them. You're talking about like in a state like Louisiana, you have the AG sending hospitals notices, basically saying like, we're watching, we're coming after you. That's a scary thing. And I've spoken to a lot of doctors who are trying to figure out how do I weigh providing this patient with care versus not being there if I go to jail or if I lose my license for the next 50 patients, right? And so it really is putting doctors in this impossible situation. And there have been a couple of studies now showing just like massive increases of depression, moral hurt that doctors are facing because of this. Obviously, the biggest concern is patients, but it does have this ripple effect. And listen, there's a reason now that a lot of anti-abortion states are not seeing a lot of doctors. OBGYNs are leaving. Their residency programs are not getting as many applicants. There's a huge, huge gap of reproductive healthcare providers in these states as a result.
Before we go, we're talking about states. We talked about Texas,
Yep.
Missouri. We talked about Louisiana. Obviously, what's happening on, at the state level. But I'm curious at the federal level, Jessica,
Yeah.
is there anything happening that would make some of these laws national that we need to know about?
Well, I mean, there's obviously the big beautiful bill, right, that has
Right. Tell us the
decimated.
impact that's going to have.
It's already like in the newsletter right now. Every day I have a section of the newsletter that's called Clinic Watch that's just tracking all of the different closures, the hardships that these clinics are facing. They quite deliberately are decimating reproductive healthcare clinics, and not just decimating them so that they can't provide abortions, but you're talking about not being able to provide birth control, cancer screenings, STI testing for the poorest Americans. It is one of the cruelest things that you can imagine. It is absolutely awful. But again, they told us they were going to do it and they did it. And that's the biggest thing that's happening um, on the federal level. I think the other thing to watch out for is that they want to reroute a lot of that funding to crisis pregnancy centers, right? To fake clinics, to ideological religious groups that not only can't prescribe birth control because they're not real doctors, but won't even talk about birth control because they oppose it. And so you're talking about taking communities, stripping them of actual reproductive health care clinics, and then repopulating them with religious centers that tell women that birth control is going to kill them. That is how you ban birth control without passing a law, right? You make it impossible for people to get, you instill fear in people about it. And so yes, a lot of stuff is happening on the state level. And while Trump does not want to make any big showy moves, he knows that it's super unpopular. It would be a mistake to think that there are not tremendous federal attacks happening as well.
And I know that Ezra Klein
Mm,
recently, he's been saying some controversial things like
yeah,
Charlie Kirk practiced politics the right way. He got a lot of
yeah,
blowback for that. You also wrote a response to him saying that Democrats should run pro life candidates to make it more
yeah.
likely to win Senate seats in Kansas and Ohio and Missouri. Give us a synopsis about what you said and why.
Yeah, I've known Ezra a long time, and I don't think he meant badly, but Kansas, Missouri, these are all states that passed or defeated ballot measures, right? We've seen huge pro-choice wins in these states. To me, what I wrote, if you think that Democrats should be running anti-abortion candidates, you have not been paying attention to abortion politics at all in the last few years. This is one of Democrats' most popular issues. If anything, we should be tripling down on it, not moving away from it.
All right. And in closing, Jessica, because I know well, I have two more questions.
Yeah,
One is, you know, the same old question. What can people do? Obviously,
yeah.
I want to tell everyone to support the incredibly important work that Jessica is doing because
Thank you.
honestly, by having the singular focus, she is gathering critically important information that we all need to know about and keep track of and be aware of because as we know it's a shit show and there's so many things to follow and that's part of the plan. But what can people do?
It's a great question. It's the question I get asked most often. I think look locally, look to see what's happening in your town. Without a doubt, every state, every community has an abortion fund, has a pro choice group that needs help, that needs volunteers, that needs fundraising, right? If you want to go even smaller, if you're a college student, look to see what your school's policies are around mifepristone. Look to see if you're in high school, look to see what the sex education policy is, right? It all matters. There's always something that we can do, even on a small local level.
All right, and then again, how can we support you, Jessica, and your work?
Thank you. Subscribe to Abortion Every Day. That's the best
And
way
that's
to
and
help me.
the best way to do that is on Substack, or
It's on
what do you think?
Substack, abortioneveryday.com or jessica.substack.com. You can just follow my little profile here, and that's the best place to find me. I'm there every day.
Well, I know it is. Well, you are there every day. And if you all would like me to regularly check in with Jessica so we know what's going on, you have a lot of big admirers watching this, Jessica, including
That's so
me.
nice.
And so we should, I think, at least every few weeks kind of say what's
Yeah,
happening. And you have my number. So if there's something really important that's going on
yeah,
that we need to know about, please just text me and let's have a conversation. And to all of you who care about women's rights, I feel like crying right now because it is so demoralizing and upsetting. And I think, it's, we were saying earlier before maybe some of you joined that even these organizations, they're trying to juggle so many issues that, like the ACLU, that, and the immigration issue is exploding and what's happening in these communities with ICE and arresting American citizens and then not giving anyone due process. I mean, it goes
yeah.
on and on. But unfortunately, as a result, reproductive rights are really getting, short shrift, except for people like Jessica, great reporters at ProPublica, but we really have to stay on top of this, everyone, and make sure we know what's going on so we can not only, as Jessica said, get involved at the local level, but certainly really look carefully at candidates and what they're saying. Because as you said to Jessica, I think when you were talking to Julia, or maybe my producer, or maybe you wrote this, about
Mm,
a lot of these people talk the talk during campaigns, and they are very misleading, like the New Jersey gubernatorial candidate. They say they're pro-choice, but they're not really pro-choice. They're just, and I do think you use the word cynical and craven and just sleazy, that
it is.
people are trying to confuse voters and, using language that makes them seem a certain way, but they're really not. And you even have a word for it. What is it called?
I'm trying to make it happen. PICO, pro-choice and campaign only, right? Like play on rhino. We'll see if it happens, but they are everywhere. They know that abortion rights are so incredibly popular. And so whenever there's a campaign, they're out there calling themselves pro-choice, by the way, really just straight up calling themselves pro-choice, even though they support bans.
Is there like, does every state have a place, or is it on your site? Let's
Mm,
say I live in Louisiana, Jessica, and I say,
yeah.
I want to get more involved in this issue. How can I do that? Is
Mm,
there a way where people can go? Yeah, I actually think that would be an incredible service if you could
mm,
put that on on your site. I don't know if you
yeah.
have already, where
Yeah.
like state by state or even city by city, we could say, okay, here's a group you can reach out to. Because sometimes I think that one step will help people get more involved.
I think that's a great idea. We have a resource section that leads to some organizations and some organizations that do have maps of, like, say, abortion funds in every state. There's groups like Reproductive Freedom for All that if you text them, they will like let you know about what's happening in your state, in your area. And then I think Planned Parenthood affiliates honestly usually have a political arm that can also help you. But I think that that's a terrific idea.
Yeah, maybe you could do that. Just put
Yeah.
resources, and then people could go to your
Yeah.
Substack, hopefully be a paid subscriber to support Jessica and her work. And then they can say, "Oh, I live in this state. I'm going to call this place. And this is my particular area of interest."
Yeah.
And then they can be guided to get more involved.
Yeah. I love that.
And I'll put it on our site too.
I think that's a great idea. We need it. We really do.